These images were recorded of the living human fascia. This shape represents the kind of three-dimensional structure, as you can see deeply into the fascia. This is Strolling Under the Skin by Dr. Jean-Claude Guimbarteau. When you see the behavior of the fascia under some pressure, you start to understand how it is moving. Watch as the fascia, tendrils of the fascia move. Imagine elasticity, surface tension, flow, and movement. The shape of these quadrahedrons are multi-layered. Look at this, amazing. The elasticity is the first component. Obviously it can move and stretch, but also notice how the fibrils can move along another fibril. This cross-linking is partly normal and partly abnormal, but you'll see this free flow. Look at this. See the way that a tubule of myofascia moves in this rendering. Now watch as you see the tendril move along another. Now think of a membrane spreading and splitting. Observe how it separates and how it can actually rejoin later on. The splitting is what we think of as the myofascial release. This amazing lattice here in this computer depiction, how it is all enmeshed and entwined in a fractal chaos. And here, the rendering of two tubules separating, for instance. See how the fascia is in constant motion, responding to our every movement, allowing every flexibility of the tissues, movement of muscles, movement of the body, joints, everything articulating and allowing this free movement. Watch again as it separates. Now, there is this conduction, this idea of the tubule as it conducts water. See this? As the water passes through a tubule of myofascia. Amazing. This is just to give you an idea of how the body, in constant motion, is responding to the myofascial release as performed by a therapist as they help you to release this cross-linking. Look at this area of densely packed fascia. This is the structure of life. Microvacuoles, pressure changes, areas, pockets of fluid. Amazing how much we are water.
We were transferring vascularized turkey tendons in our university research lab, and were struck by the intricacy of the vascular network. Thereafter, the Chinese school of plastic surgery discovered the notion of the retrograde flap, and we began to develop a technique for transferring vascularized retrograde tendon flexor transfers onto the cubital pedicle to get round the problem of reconstructing flexor tendons. Little by little, this new vision of anatomy began to throw light on the relationships between the tendons, the sliding sheaths, and the vessels, and to challenge the very foundations of the classical school of thought. During the revascularization following the release of a garret, we observed that not only the tendinous extremities bled with an apparently circular longitudinal and peripheral vascularization, in contradiction with the avascular theory that held sway at that time, but that there seemed to be a real continuity between the sheaths and the tendons, which was not interrupted despite the distension occurring during sliding. It was also clear from observing the behavior of the vessels of the common carpal sheath during flexion and extension that rather simplistic mechanistic explanations could no longer account for these phenomena, and that this apparent disorder and irregularity of shapes was in fact the basis of some other form of complexity that we still knew hardly anything about. In our attempts to find an explanation, we began detailed in vivo microscopic analysis of the distribution and mobility of the vessels using 25-fold video magnification. By looking at a vessel as a petrol pump, we were able to approach the problem more simply. There was this vertical structure looking like the main part of the pump, then the pipe, and finally the adjoining vessel, just like a car filling up at the gas station. The pipe seemed to move away as the car moved off.
musical guest.